Hello comrades. If my audio and video everything is fine and you can see me and you can hear me properly, then please let me know in the comment box. Once we get to know that there is no technical glitches, there is no problem, we can start our session, which is particularly on national education policy, which is one of the most trending and the most the hot topic of today, and it's going to be at least for a few more upcoming days. So if you can hear me and if you can listen me, just let me know and can see. Sorry, not listen to it. I can see people joining in. Just put a comment that everything is fine, so we can start. I think I'm on time. Yeah, it's 4 minutes late. That is not good. Comments, can any of you let me know whether my everything is audible or not? Or is it people are messaging and I'm not able to see? What is the thing? Maybe there is a glitch and I cannot see my comments. I don't know. Oh yes, now I can see. Okay. Thank you, comrade. Thank you so much. So first of all, before starting our live today, I want to congratulate each and every one, our comrades, the students who have taken part our Twitter storm which Student Federation of India has taken in a very short notice. It was just yesterday evening that we decided that against this national education policy, against the NEP 2020, which was not thoroughly discussed, which was just abruptly brought into the place, and our government has agreed to pass it and implement it. So just yesterday evening we just thought that we are going to do a flash Twitter storm today from 2 o'clock, and I'm really happy and I'm really glad to share this information with all of you that we had an extremely successful Twitter campaign. More than 20,000 tweets were tweeted with our hashtag, and more importantly, we were trending at least in number 1, sometime 2 or 3 for at least more than 2 to 3 hours, and for last 4 hours we were there in the top 10 hashtags which were trending. So first of all, I want to congratulate each and everyone who has taken part in today's Twitter campaign and made our program, our protest successful today. Thank you so much and congratulations to all of you, because we believe that it is very important. It is very important that at a time, at a regime where the government is trying to dictate us, where the government is coming and trying to tell us what we should do, what we should study, what food we should eat, what clothes we should wear, who are the people we should get married to, what caste we should be friend with, what caste should enter a temple or not. It is very important. It is very important that we let the government know that the young people of this country, the student, the youth, we are not going to sit back. We are not going to sit back and take all that autocratic decision that you have been taking. We are not going to sit back and take all this conspiracy that you have been framing behind us to completely destroy our future, the future of this country and also the future of this generation. Now, before we start talking about the National Education Policy 2020, let us first know, some basic idea about how education policies in general work. So this is the education policy that we are talking about, New Education Policy 2020. This is the third full-phased education policy that is being proposed by the government. Before that, there were 2 more, and the last one was 34 years back. So in this 34 years, there was no education policy, and it's very strange and disheartening at the same time that with such a changing time, that with so many new advancements happening, with so many new challenges coming, no government thought that this is the right time to really renovate and think through from the existing education policies that we are having. So this education policy that is right now with us, it is a fresh education policy. There was a draft that the government published which called the draft National Education Policy 2019. So the process is that once you publish a draft of any policy, you give a time frame. You give a time frame and ask people to give you suggestion, and this is open to all. You can be a student, you can be a teacher, you can be a social worker, a political worker. If you think that there is some problem there is some problem in the proposed policy by the government, you have the right, you have the space that you can go, you can put your opinions, you can put your suggestion, and you can ask the government to think about it. So when the first time the draft new education policy came in 2019, from Student Federation of India, keeping all the procedures in mind, we have given memorandum, we have done a mass mailing, saying that what are the problems that we find in that draft. After that, our comrades, our leadership went and met Mr. HRD Minister and handed over a memorandum demanding a concrete points that your education policy is saying A, B, C, D, and these are our problems, these are our contention, these are the things what we are apprehending is not going to be good for students. We expected, we thought that maybe this government is going to really work in a democratic manner. Maybe they are going to really consider the voices of all the people, the stakeholders, the students, the teachers, and all the other people. We thought after a thorough discussion in the parliament, where our MPs, the people whom we vote to decide about our future, goes there and sit, with all of their consultation, with all of their discussion, there is going to be a new education policy that is coming in. But what we got yesterday in our hand, which abruptly come, and our government said that they're ready to implement it even without a single discussion in the parliament, we must say that it came up with a lot of disappointment. We know that education is not a central list, it's in the concurrent list, so both the center and the state government, both of them invest in it. Both of them had enough jurisdiction to actually take decision on it, but without consulting the state governments, without consulting even its own parliament member, the government thought that this is the right time, a time where there is pandemic, a time where people are dying either out of the disease or out of hunger. This is the right time. This is the right time to come up with a new education policy without any discussion. We already know that the UGC guidelines that they have come up with, where they were in a way forcing people either to go and give online examination or to go to their school and college, university and give offline examination, and in both way making the students vulnerable, one physically, and for the people they are proposing or pushing for online examination, deepening the digital divide. I think there had been enough talk. We from SFI and I also had even in your pages also, we have spoken elaborately that what is digital divide and how it is problematic. I'm not going into that discussion, but I'm just trying to contextualize that at a time where the country is fighting from so many evil, with so many problems, with so many challenges, our government thought that this is the right time to come up with an education policy which is just not just a piece of paper. An education policy has a very prolonged effect in the upcoming generation, in the generation that we are in our future of the country. But they thought without a discussion they can come up with, and they did. Now if you go through the draft, the gist of the education policy and the thing that they're implementing, it's very fancy. I would say this is the word I want to really coin. It's a very fancy education policy. It talks about multidisciplinary learning. It has a lot of copy pasting and lot of influenced, I would say in a nicer word, a lot of being influenced from the American way of their moduling, their way of learning, their way of teaching. So they have this moduled coursework. They do not have unlike our system where we had a honors subject, a major subject, and along with that you take subjects which are helping you in understanding the honors subject that you are doing, or something that helps you in having a wholesome, wholehearted idea about the subject you're pursuing. Unlike that, it has a very different approach, and we see without really comparing the socio-economic or the political condition of America or the socio-economic and political condition of India, without comparing it, there is a lot of replication, there is a lot of inspiration that they bought from the American system, and they tried to impose it on us. Now there are several things which we are opposing. All throughout the day in Twitter, people has taken they made it a point to make sure saying that what are the problem that they have with new education policy. Before going to that, I want to say that there are few parts which we as an organization believe that which has a positive trait, or if implemented that can have some positive effect. For instance, that they're talking about that there is going to be a gender fund. This is something what they also said in the draft. This is something what we also appreciated when we spoke with them. We said this is a very nice initiative, and this gender fund will be used particularly to help the women students. We said that it's a welcoming thing. they also spoke about continuous evaluation. They are saying that unlike one main or two main examination which are made almost a sacrosanct and made all of us believe that if you do not do good in your boards, if you do not do good in your 10th, if you do not do good in your 12th, your whole life is is going to be futile. There is no future for you. So there is a change on that system. There is going to be continuous evaluation. So your everyday work, your assignments, your internals, your class presentation, your class participation, your extracurricular activity, everything is going to be every day evaluated. So that's a very scientific process where children or the students are not burdened or not pushed to muggle up their their lessons, that they just read something and they go vomit in their examination center. So that's a positive thing. We from Student Federation of India think that's a positive part of the new education policy. But there are other many things which we believe is going to be really problematic for the upcoming days. I'm not going to go for line by line, but we believe that once you go through that new education policy that is going to be implemented, there is a sense, there is an effort of trying to tell you that government is no more going to give their effort, is no more going to give their investment into the higher education. If you look at even earlier in the draft also, they said that there is not going to be any university grant commission. Instead of UGC, there is going to be a HEFA. So this HEFA is going to give you loan, not grant. And if you are given loan, that needs to be paid back. How you are going to pay back? If it's a university, if it's a college, the only way of paying back a loan is making sure that your fees are high. It's making sure that the money that you are getting from the students are large in number, so that even after covering all the expenditure in your own university or the school or institution, you can pay back the loan that you have taken from the government. So we believe that this is something which is going to be completely counterproductive to the higher education of India, because you already know the people from marginalized community, the poor people, the women, the Dalit, the Adivasi or the Muslims, their representation in the higher education is very less. Now the moment you say that now the fees are going to be increased, now only those who with a lot of money could study, so you're essentially telling that if you're a poor person, if you're a Dalit, if you're a woman, if you're a Muslim, if you're from marginalized community, then it's okay if you do not study, because this government is only going to provide study to those people, education to those people who can afford it. So this essentially leads to commercialization of education, corporatization of education, and break the backbone of this country. We know we were under the colonial rule. We know for a long time British was conquering us, British was ruling us. Before that there was a rule, and which still continues, the rule of a caste. We know there were some people who were believed to be that they are sacred, so they have a sacred thread. So all these Savarnas, they are the only people who had the right to education, and all the other people, particularly the working class and the working caste, they didn't have any right to study. Which was one main reason, which was one major reason why India was not being able to go forward. Now after independence, people like Baba Saheb Ambedkar, people like Savitribai Phule, they all tried to upturn this whole pyramid, and tried to make sure the people who are more in number, the people who are actually laboring in the fields, the people who are laboring inside the home or in the factory, they should have the right to knowledge, they should have the right to education. And we see that our government, once after the independence, tried at least have a vision of a universalized education, that education won't be a commodity, education won't be a privilege, but education would be a right. Now this thing from the first education policy, which were talking about empowering Indians, which are talking about making education universalized, in 2020 we are standing and telling that this is a complete 180-degree turn. We are saying that no, it's not important, it's not necessary that whether education is equitable or not, whether education is accessible or not, but what is important, whether education is profitable or not, whether from education the corporate sector or even the government, they are able to create some surplus or not. And I think that is where the problem lies. This is one fundamental, one philosophical turn that started from 90s, where we have liberalized our market, where we let our education in the hand of market economy. From there, this turn that today we are having, the new education policies that we are having, it's as a full circle. We actually have come up a lot and we are coming to the world and we are saying that no, the government is no more going to be taking the responsibility of education, and this is one major concern of us. Our next major concern is that in that education bill, they have spoken very proudly about the foreign university bill. So a lot of people might think that foreign university bill is a nice thing, the university from the abroad is going to come. So first of all, I want to tell you that nowhere in that foreign university bill it is mentioned that which kind of universities that are going to come here. You might think that whenever you think of a foreign university, you are thinking of Cambridge, you are thinking of Harvard, you are thinking of Oxford or Yale or all these A-listers, but there is a probability, there is a possibility that all the universities that are going to come into our land, the subsidies that they're going to enjoy by your government, maybe those universities won't be a A-lister. Maybe those universities will be just an A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, some random private university which operates in abroad. We think that there is no proper guideline, there is no proper framework on to say that how or on which process they're going to make sure the people who are coming from outside are enough capable. They maintain that standard of their course, they maintain the standard of their learning. Along with that, we also believe many academicians had shown this concern that the moment the private universities or the foreign universities come and started making their campuses here, who is going to decide what is going to be the fee structure? Right now in India, there are so many private universities which is completely unaffordable for a large section of Indian population. A large section of Indian students, let it be a girl or a boy, they cannot go and study there because it is so expensive. Their fees are expensive, their hostel is expensive, the whole space that has been created there, it feels so exclusive, they do not feel a part of it, and there are multiple level of exclusion that all those universities are having. If the foreign universities, their campuses are settled or established in our country, what is the guarantee that these universities will also not end up being just another private university which is exclusionary, which is expensive, and a majority of our students, majority of our people do not have access to that education? The third and the most interesting thing is which many people who are in the teaching profession that they're apprehending, that what will happen that once this foreign universities are settled down, definitely there is going to be a higher pay scale that they're offering, and particularly staying in a country which has a long history of colonialism. I think all of us, all the people with brown skin, we have this love for the people or for the institution abroad, or the institution which are run by the white skin or the Europeans or the Americans. So there is a chance that the cream section, the teachers, the professors, the faculties, they are going to be taken down, they are going to be taken out from the public universities, and they are going to put into, or they will just opt for those foreign universities that are coming. So in that way, we are actually going to make sure that our public universities, which are self-sufficient now, if you look at the last statistics or the last result that the government only has come up with, the first rankers or the people that they thought are actually doing good are universities like Jamia, universities like JNU, are mostly the public funded universities. So what will happen that if in a situation like India, where there is already fund crunch, where there is already a lot of problem people face while they try to do research in Indian universities, if you come and give this offer of a parallel foreign university, there is a chance that there is going to be brain drain. A lot of people, like our cream section, let it be in the faculty or let it be in the students, they won't be retained in our public university. So it is going to destroy the public university system. And when you were saying this is just not apprehension, we have seen that there was a time that even the government schools used to be very self-sufficient. We remember that even like our early childhood, going to a public school, going to a government school was a big thing, because a lot of people do not get chance in public schools, and people who could get it, they were considered as to be someone lucky or someone who is meritorious. But we have seen that categorically, strategically, how with defunding, how with giving space to the private player, the condition of the public schools, the condition of the public education is destroyed, and given the space and widen the space for the public players to play. We believe that if the foreign university bill is being implemented, the similar kind of thing could happen. There is another part which, as students we are concerned of, and this is not the first time. Even earlier also we have spoken about it. That is the FYUP, the 4-year undergraduate program that this government is talking about, where they are saying that like earlier where you have a 3-year graduation program, it is going to be 4 years. So first year you get in, there is some problem, you drop out, you get a certificate. Second year you study but you could not continue for your third year, okay, you get a diploma. In third year you are there, you are not able to somehow continue in your fourth year, okay, we'll give you a third year ka degree. And of course after the fourth year, if you can do little rigorous work in the research, you will have a degree, a 4-year degree with a research. But the thing is that, the interesting thing is that here they are saying that it's a very flexible model. You can go anytime, the exit is so easy. But what they're not talking is why people leave education. Why a person who got admission in a BA program or a BSc program in a college drops out in between. Why a person who is in their first year do not complete it and go to the second year? Why a person who is in the second year do not complete their study and go to the third year? Is it because they are non-meritorious? Is it because they are not interested in study? Or is it because there are so many issues that are existing in our country? We have the issues of caste. We know our universities were becoming the graveyards for the people from the marginalized community. We have instances like Rohit Vemula. We have instances of Fatima Latif in IIT, in HCU, where marginalized students, the students who come from the marginalized community, are treated in such a way that they feel that they do not belong here, that they feel that it's their birth which is the problem. And there are multiple cases, multiple stories of suicide and institutional murders. So at a time where caste as an institution is so strong that even in a progressive modern education institution like the IITs or HCU or any other central university, they can work, they can function, and they can force people to take their life. I think we should understand that the people do not leave their classes, people do not leave their courses voluntarily. It is this system, this oppressive system, that push people out from their academic career. We know that in a country like India, a patriarchal country like India, there are different yardstick for women. So if you are a woman and if you are around your 20s, that is the right time for you to get married. So even if you are studying, that's okay, your studies can wait. If there is a good boy that the family thinks is right, you should get married with that person, because if you're going to get old, nobody is going to marry you. So all these kind of things actually push a lot of people to stop their study, to leave their dreams and be a dropout. Instead of challenging that, instead of addressing the deep-rooted question of caste, the deep-rooted question of structural inequality, the deep-rooted question of patriarchy, our government is in a way justifying, or I would say institutionalizing, these dropouts and say, okay, you are just exiting out, you are choosing to leave your courses. But the question is, they didn't choose. The society, the system has forced them. So this is something we believe is going to really affect. It's going to really, it's actually generalizing a problem. It's actually neutralizing a problem where the thing should be opposite. And we also believe that all these certificates that they're talking about, let it be a diploma, let it be a 1-year-old certificate or a 3-year-old degree that you're going to get, who is going to give you a job? Imagine you have started studying physics. Now, after 1 year, you have a certificate. You have a certificate course in physics. Who is going to give you a job? Where you are going to go and apply for it? After 2 years, you have a diploma. Who is going to give you a job in a diploma in botany, a diploma in political science, or a 3-year-old or a 3-year graduation, where the institutions are asked, institutions are told that they will be preferring a person who has done a 4-year course, not the other one. So if the government has already made their priority, why they are trying to normalize, why they are trying to neutralize a difficult thing, a very unfortunate thing, a problematic thing like that of dropout? Another thing that this government is coming, and I think a lot of people of my generation, like my friends and colleagues, that they thought that they're very happy about, that things are really flexible now. You can study physics honors, and along with that you can study fashion designing also. I mean, of course, it sounds really cool. It's like you're having French fries with vanilla ice cream. But what purpose does it solve? How a combination like that is going to help you? And if you look at, I mean, I said it from my personal experiences, that there are many states There are many states where this rigidity about arts, science and commerce is not maintained. If I tell you my experience after my 10th, in my class 11th and 12th, my subjects were geography, mathematics, biology and computer application. Now geography is considered to be something which is a core of arts, mathematics and biology is of course core of science, and computer application which can be put in both the cases. So I took this kind of combination because in Kolkata, once you go for BSc in geography, they ask either mathematics or economics along with it. So the thing is that now you are suddenly saying something which was already in place, a practice which was already in place in many parts of our country. Suddenly you are coming and now and saying that no, this is something new we are starting. Now there is no segmentation between the arts, commerce and science, and people can choose what they want to choose. But the question is, even if I take fashion designing with physics, who is going to give me the honors once I go to graduation? Even in the graduation, if I take physics and fashion designing, after my passing, who is going to give me job on either basis of physics or on the basis of the fashion designing? So these are the questions that are very valid question. This things are really nice to read as a fiction. We all read novel, we all read storybook. So as a fiction, these are very nice, very soothing, very comforting lines to read. But in practicality, in a country like India, where getting a primary education, getting a decent education is itself a challenge for a large section of our population, I think defragmenting the education system itself is not going to help us anyway. So we believe that what this government is trying to do is a typical neoliberal postmodern trap, where you try to say that there are choices. You have plenty of choices. You can choose whatever you want to choose, but there is no certainty, there is no security what is going to happen with it. And I continue my previous argument with saying that, now imagine a situation, everything is choice based, okay? You go to your college, you choose which are the subject you are going to teach. Now think from someone who is a teacher. So I am doing my PhD. After 2 years, or say after 3 years, I aspire to be a teacher. So I am a geography student, I want to be a teacher of geography. I go apply in a college. Now my college say that why should I take you? Why should I take you as a permanent employee? Because I'm not sure the students that are going to come in the upcoming batches, they're going to choose you. I'm not sure that there will be enough people who will choose geography as a subject. So what I will do? I'll do a contract with you. You will do 5 classes for me. Once your 5 classes are done, I'll give you some money, and that's it. Once your classes are done, you go to the other places, you find some other jobs. So this whole idea of permanent job, permanent teaching profession is going to be under question, because now the government or even any employer, let it be even a private player, they do not need permanent employee, they do not need permanent teachers, because the idea that there will be any permanent subject is no more there. It is so much of choice based that the permanency of teaching job is going to be in question. And we believe that it has a devastating effect. It has a devastating effect for people of my generation, people who are thinking of completing their PhD, staying in the academics, or teaching students, to be very frank. I think there's going to be a devastating effect. In Delhi University, have already seen it. The plight of ad hocism, the plight of contractualism, where scholars are looked upon as someone who is just a cheap labor, because there is a certainty that that the job will be there or not. Since your job is completely dependent on whether the management or the senior teachers are liking you or not, they're exploited like anything. There is no time. They're been pushed for doing extra time. There is no certainty that for how long their contract will be renewed. So what the government is trying to do is that they want to create a lot of people, a lot of cheap labor who are semi-skilled and desperate. If you are not having a wholesome knowledge into a certain certain subject in a certain discipline, if you have these choices like fashion designing, physics and home science, and then after 3 years or 4 years of your completion, you are desperate to find a job, the system, the market have you as cheap labor. Whatever they want you to do, they can make you do so, because there is no certainty of job. Whatever job you will get, you will try to do that. So we believe what this government is trying to do is create a semi-skilled pool of cheap labor who can be used at a direction of the capital, who can be used at the direction of the market. And this is completely counterproductive to the growth of India. Because now if you see all the other countries who got independence along with us, if you do not want to look at China, don't look at China. You look at all the other South Asian or Southeast Asian countries. You look at the kind of progress they got. You look at how they are actually fighting in the global market. They're fighting in their electronics. They're fighting with their own innovation. Why India has failed? The reason why India has failed, that India was not able to produce their indigenous technology. When all these other South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries to be particular, if you consider China also along with them, what they did is a huge investment in their R&D, in their research and development. They give their universities a lot of grant, lot of scholarship, lot of money, and they told them, their young people, that you work. Whatever you want to invent, whatever you want to study, whatever you want to find out, you do it. Your government is here to support you. And you look at them. They're getting the result of it. Right now, all these people have their independent indigenous technology that they can sell in the global market. They have their own skilled labor, they have their own technology, and they're self-sufficient. In one hand, when Narendra Modi ji is talking about being Atmanirbhar, being self-sufficient, how we are going to be self-sufficient? Until and unless our youth is empowered, until and unless you make sure that all these researchers who are there in your IITs, in your central universities, in all the other higher education places, until you give them that confidence that your country is standing by you, your country is actually depending on your innovation, on your merit, how this country is going to go forward. We believe that the new education policy, particularly in the case of higher education, is going to be a dead end. It's going to be a dead end for many people, people who come from my generation, people who come from a social, political or economic background like me. I don't think people will be able to dream of doing a PhD, of doing research anymore, because the whole idea of education, from an equalizer, from something which empowers people, it has become a product, it has become a commodity. So government is no more a government. A government is no more governing you. What it's doing, it's providing you services. So whoever provides us services, we give them something in exchange. So the government is trying to create this neo-clientism, that the citizens are no more citizens. Citizens do not have right. What they are is client, and the government is no more the government. They don't have any social responsibility, they don't have any moral responsibility. What they will do is business, what they will do is provide service. And this is something philosophically we are against. This is something we believe is structurally against the interest of our nation. It is against the interest of India. So for that reason, Student Federation of India and many other left organization, we all have come together and we have told that there cannot be, once this education policy is implemented, our future is going to be completely dark, and we cannot let that happen. So that's why I urge all of you who are listening to me, I mean, if you have a question, if you have a different idea, if you want to say that no, whatever you are saying wrong, please come, please let us have a fruitful discussion. Because as I was telling, that it's not only about opposing a certain government. It's not about opposing what Narendra Modi is doing. What we are trying to say, that whatever Narendra Modi's government does today, it has a really prolonged effect. Not only our generation, our upcoming generation, all of us are going to be suffering. And I don't think any of us want it. As Student Federation of India, we are open, we are ready for a frank, for a logical discussion. We will also try to talk to the HRD minister. We are saying that you amend it. There are few core issues that we are raising. You still have the time. You open your parliament, or you discuss with your parliamentarian and find out that that there is no way that your policies are harming the interest of India. And if there is some question, I would love to take that. I would just while you write your question, I'll just tell you this, that a lot of people, while we are doing the Twitter trend, were coming and telling that it's okay, we can take a break from our studies, we can do something and we can come back. A lot of people could do it. I mean, a lot of people who come from upper class family, from upper caste family, who do not have the responsibility of their family on their shoulder, they could actually take a break, take some time, enjoy some time, and then can come back to study. But that is not the situation for majority of my countrymen. For my countrymen, each and every year, each and every day, each and every month that they invest into this whole education structure, that matters. And we cannot right now in this situation think of such a overwhelming change without having a proper infrastructure. There are so many vacancies in the teaching post. Those could not be, they could not be recruited because our government has been cutting the fund for the education for a long time. The infrastructure, public university infrastructure or the public education infrastructure has been deteriorating because of the disinvestment by the government. Now this government cannot just come out from the air and say that okay, we are going to make the 6% GDP. The 6% GDP is nothing new that you are telling. From the first day of the first education policy when it was framed, it was written 6% GDP. Next time it came, it was written in the 6% GDP. You go and take any educational report. All these high-level committees which were formed to understand or evaluate the education system, everybody came and suggested, yes, there should be 6% GDP. You take any, manifesto of the political parties. Everybody before their, election, they say, yeah, we are going to make 6% of GDP. But by now, it has never happened. During the BJP's time, what you have done is slashing the budget like anything. You slashed the scholarship, you slashed the money that used to be giving for the overall development of the education in universities and infrastructure and other things. So it will be actually an eye wash if you come and right now say that there's going to be 6% GDP. So Narendra Modi is doing great. This is a path breaking. Of course, this is a path breaking, but this breaking of path is not taking us in a better situation, but it is going to worsen our future. So with that, I want to end my monologue. If there are some questions, I would love to answer. Okay. Comrade Raja from Andhra Pradesh. Hello, comrade. Reject NEP. Of course, all of us should. Lal Salam, comrade. A lot of people told me Lal Salam. I'm not taking all of your name and responding to it. Somebody said to speak me in Bangla. I think we will do a live on Bangla also. Our comrade Mayuk, our General Secretary of SFI, he has done a video. I think many of our comrades who are from West Bengal, they will do. I will also try to do. But this page, their audience is majorly, they don't understand Bangla. It has more people who speak other language than that of Bangla. So that's why I'm not saying in Bengali, but definitely there will be our comrades, our people who will be speaking in Bangla along with me. Leave the all things with earlier irrigation policies, would not clarification. I think I just told that. Maybe you are not paying attention, Mr. Sengupta Subrata. Comrade, young leadership should introduce all Communist Party for the better results. Okay. A lot of comrades told me Lal Salam to all of you. When it comes to discussing an education policy in the country with the state government, even if the decision right, the state government will oppose it. I think the country should have one education system. I think you are completely wrong, Mr. Subrata Sengupta. I don't think so much diversified country like India can have one kind of education system, because we are a beautiful country. If you look at the northeast, there is no similarity to those people to the people in the south. I mean, we say that in India, after every village, the language that you say it changes. So this is the level of diversity. This is the level of differences, and this is not something that we should be ashamed of. This is not a problem. Having different people who are living under a same country is not a problem. It's something what all of us should be very proud of. That we are such a great country where people live with such differences. All of us have learned, all of us have taught from the beginning of our education that we are a country which is unity in diversity. There are so many differences, still we are one. So this oneness comes in respecting this diversity. This oneness comes in letting people have their own mind, having their own culture and not interrupting each other. And that's where the beauty of India lies. So now if you come and say that there should be one kind of education, there should be one language, there should be one culture, I think that is completely against the idea of India. Because India is no monolithic, homogenic, it's not Israel. where a single caste, a single religion, a single language, a single race has formed a nation. We are multiracial, multilingual, multi-religious country, and that's what we are proud of. So I don't think there should be one kind of education. The diversity that our education system has is something that needs to be preserved. The state governments who actually spend more percentage of budget than that of the central government, they need to be considered, because the number of state government run schools, the number of state government run colleges are much more than that of which are under the direct control of the central government. So if you think that without consulting the state leaderships or the state governments who are democratically elected by that state, you might not like whatever their politics is, but they are democratically elected. Just like Narendra Modi is elected by the Indian population democratically, all the state chief ministers or the people who are in power, they are also democratically elected. So there is no way that you can say that no, they should not be considered, they should not be consulted, because even if it's a good thing they are going to oppose, I think it's a completely stupid idea, because there are many states where you are also running. So what you are saying that just because you're in state government and you are going to oppose the central government, I think that's a completely vague idea. I think India's beauty lies in its diversity. India's beauty lies in being democratic, and whatever has happened in the name of new education policy, that is like an extreme centralism, where you take all the power in your hand. Anyway, our government is telling they're not going to give the GST money that the states were supposed to have. So each and every day they're telling the federalism that India is standing upon, and it's a very dangerous turn that this government is taking. And if you are thinking that this NEP will also be a part of it, I think we are really making all of ourselves into a danger. Comrade, this draft is the origin secondary education policy. It is semi-fascist state. What is the negative feature? What is the constitution? Comment. I just I explained it quite categorically. Maybe you could not hear, or you have missed it. I think we can definitely have a much more elongated discussion sometime else. And also very soon from Student Federation of India, we're going to come up with a detailed our opposition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that will also be easy. I understand completely that it's very confusing, the NEP, because the language is so sleek, the language sounds so progressive, the language sounds so democratic and liberating. A lot of people might not at first glance find what are the problems, but that's where the work of the social scientists are, that's where the work of the people who are in politics are. We have read it thoroughly and we have found some structural problems. What we have discussed some here, and we are going to come up more elaborately in a written form. Lal Salam, comrade. Government investment is well funded concern, of course. Inqilab Zindabad. Okay. Thank you, comrade. Means you want to say that teacher and cheap labor will be safe after the implementation of NEP. No, what I wanted to say that people who could be researcher, people who could be scientists, people who could be teacher would become a cheap labor who does not have a dignity of work, who does not have a certainty, who will become just this unorganized. They will just part of that unorganized labor sector, and that's not something that we want. And of course, how I didn't understand. Why did you think that I said that teachers will be safe? No one. I mean, the NEP is actually fundamentally against academia. It's against the students. It's against the teachers as well. They are going to be contractualized, and they will be ad hoc. So their rights as teachers, their right as permanent employee will be curtailed, and which is definitely not something that we are looking for. Absolutely, merits and demerits are there. It can be discussed and implemented carefully. I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, a lot of people might just think that we are opposing it just because it's Narendra Modi. It's actually not in the same way. I think you can see that in ABVP. So when the Congress regime was there, Congress regime tried to implement FYUP, this 4-year undergraduate plan in Delhi University, and ABVP was in the forefront. They were coming and telling that this FYUP is going to destroy our education. This should go back. Congress Sarkar Murdabad and what not. Now these are the same ABVP who are coming and supporting the FYUP. So it's very clear that unlike other student organizations like us, who were vocal, were against these policies then and who are vocal and against those policies now. The BJP is basically an organization of hypocrites. They just do whatever their masters who are sitting are asking them to do. Few days back, when there was a different government, they had a problem with FIUP. Now, when their own government is implementing it, they're clapping it and trying to trend things in Twitter and whatnot. Red salute. Accepting the policy should never be the choice. What will be the procedure to go for revision and reconsideration? I think there are two ways, as I was telling. We are already appealing. We will appeal to the ministry, to the HRD, which became an education ministry now. We'll definitely do all the paperwork which needs to be done. But along with that, we also believe, I think I'll just borrow this line from Srijan, that what Parliament can do, the streets can undo. So if you think that Parliament have taken some decision which is against our interest, which is against the interest of a majority of our people, we are definitely going to come up in the streets. We are going to build solidarities and are going to create resistance. Already in Himachal Pradesh, in Kolkata today, there were protests. Tomorrow I think there will be a big rally in Kolkata. So things are getting heated up. If the government does not listen to our appeal, if the government does not try to understand our genuine concerns, we'll take to the streets. There is no option. We are never scared of it. Chandru is saying, La salam, comrade. Is this policy urban student oriented? Yeah. Not only urban. It's basically a urban middle class, upper middle class oriented, policy, where you are saying that we are going to have all this foreign university, abroad university, where rich people children, the rich children are going to go. They're going to get their education, and all the poor people who will be flushed out in this FYUP process, all of these people will go and fry pakora. So this is the kind of model that they want to implement, where the rich, where the privileged get all the butter of the system, they get all the good thing about this system, and the people like us, the people coming from the working class families, they get dispossessed. So you're absolutely right that this is urban student oriented, and not only urban student oriented, but urban elite middle class, upper middle class student oriented. Reject NEP 2020, La Salam, CPIM Trichy. Okay. I already answered that, Chandru, about the 6% GDP thing. The 6% GDP is nothing new. 6% GDP was there from the first time the education policy was there. So every government comes and says there will be 6% GDP, but it's never implemented. And looking at BJP's trajectory, it does not look they are going to do it, because when they were in the government for all these past years, they have slashed the education budget. Every time they have reduced the amount of budget they were allocating. It's around some 4% or something. So I don't think that this whole jumla of 6%, how it is going to happen, there is no timeline of it, there is no outline of it. So it's just eyewash, nothing more than that. Comrade Adarsh is saying #SFI. Okay. R&D fund cut is drastic in the last year from 0.086%. Absolutely, Akash is a student of IIT. A very good student, a very good comrade. You're absolutely right. That's what we are telling, that in one side you're talking about being Atmanirbhar, being self-sufficient, and in the other hand you are cutting down the research funds and the grants. First of all, okay, Lal Salam, comrade. It's a long Harshal. Oh, I think Harshal is our comrade from IFLU. Can you talk about how the NEP is going to affect participatory decision-making process that was there in the public universities? Also, can you also elaborate how undemocratic the board of governors will be and how top-to-bottom approach will come up? The thing is that whatever they have proposed in the new education policy, many of them they have already tried and tested. As Harshal could know it very well, or my experience in JNU would say that the way they have replaced the administrative bodies with their own people, with people who are basically nothing but the bootlickers of RSS, and how they try to construct the consensus in a very undemocratic manner, but being inside the structure. So now what they are doing, they are just legitimizing that whole thing. They are saying that this governor, I mean, who are these people who are going to govern us? Earlier, when in JNU or in many other central university, the AC or AC was a democratic space where teachers, where HODs, where the chairpersons, they used to come together and try to think through that how their university can do better. Now what you are trying to do, that there is not going to be like a, what do I say, like there's not going to be a self-governance. Your teachers, your administrator, your administrative officer are not going to decide how this university is going to run. So there will be some people from the above, some people from the central government who are going to direct, who are going to dictate that how and where your university should go. And this is something which actually links to this very idea of centralism that I think our comrade was raising question also, that how curtailing down the federalism, they have anyway centralized the power of operating into their hand, and by putting all these governors, all these other puppet bodies on the head of the universities and the higher education institution, they are just going to extend, they are just going to intensify this very conspiracy of centralism. I think there are, okay, regional language or even Hindi is not fit for 21st century education. 95% of this is in English. The government give preference to local languages, Sanskrit or even English will lagging behind the course and language. But the consequence of this will be distance. Hope the national people will not get into the world and people are very excellent. I think though they are talking about regional language and everything, but it's very interesting how in this whole thing, how Sanskrit gets in the place. I mean, you tell me, who speaks, who converse in Sanskrit in today's world? No one, just no one. I remember in my school time, we used to study Sanskrit for 2 years as an optional subject, and the whole idea of teaching Sanskrit was it helps you in making your Bengali grammar better. That's it. I don't think that Sanskrit, the way this government is very planfully with all the regional languages trying to push Sanskrit also, it has a complete different agenda behind it. MPhil has been removed by government, so it is benefit for students. I think I have a different take on this, because a lot of people might say that okay, now you don't have 2 years to waste. But the thing is that as being someone who has done her MPhil, I would say doing a MPhil helps you a lot in your research. So it's basically you are running a mini research. You are getting to know about the research methodologies. You know how research happens in actuality, and there is no harm. I mean, there is no hurry. I mean, what we are fighting against, what we are running behind. Particularly if it's a research, it needs to be time taking. The researchers, we always say that governments need to consider researchers as workers. We are not doing the research for our individual gain. When we are researching, we are actually contributing to the society. So it's almost like a profession. It's almost like working. So I don't think that it's also not like that there are plenty of job opportunity that are waiting. So if you do your PhD jaldi, you'll get a job. So I think that whole dismantling of MPhil has nothing to do with making sure that our quality of research gets better. And I don't think that's going to happen if the MPhil is taken down. Pranav, okay. Let alone invest in education, the government does not even care about sustaining the already inadequate scale of research that exists. The allocation by the government in the budget for research scholar fellowship was slashed. Research scholarship has not received their fellowship for months. You are absolutely right. Pranav is a classmate and a very good comrade. He's really good in his studies also, and he's a very good researcher. So he's absolutely right. Our experience in JNU has been that even during the pandemic, the research scholars were not getting their fellowship. I mean, it's very ironical, it's very funny that when our government comes today and say that, India is going to be world-class this and that, we have make a revolutionary change in our education system and all that. You do not have the measures to retain the existing education system that you have. And now you're talking about 4 years, you're talking about, a hell of a like a change in your education policy without really thinking through, without really outlining from where these monies are going to come. So I think Pranav is completely right in that way. I completely agree with Pranav. I think I'm not going to extend my speech anymore because I have another live to do after this also, and this is and today, because of this our Twitter storm and all, the day being little hectic, so I'm sorry if I could not answer some of your questions, because I cannot see any questions. So I hope I have answered most of your questions. If there are not, please feel free to contact us in this page or personally to me. We'd love to talk, we'd love to share our thoughts and exchange our opinions. So with that, I want to congratulate all of you for giving this time, for having such beautiful interactive session. I hope all of us will see each other in the upcoming struggles. Shukriya, Inqalab Zindabad.